Okay, Mr. Chairman, we are live on YouTube. Yes.
Thank you. If you're ready for roll call, I think we are.
All right. I will just do it alphabetical until we have our election of chairman and vice chairman. So start with Senator Boner.
Yes, excused.
Senator Driscoll.
Excused.
Senator French.
Excused.
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Excused.
Senator Steinmetz. Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Eklund.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Neiman.
Here.
Representative Paxton.
Here.
And Representative Simpson.
Here.
Abigail, it's Representative Nyman.
Nyman, thank you. As soon as I said it, I wondered.
Yeah, well, he'll correct you eventually if I don't.
Thank you. I wasn't paying attention. Thank you. All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started and call the meeting to order. We do have our e-notebook here, and I think Director Gephardt is here, so we'll go ahead and begin with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. I'll go ahead and jump right in, try to be concise and not take up too much of your time.
Representative Larson, did you want to do election of your chairman and vice chairman?
I think it would be best if we could move it a little bit later if the committee would okay that. Okay, we'll do that a little bit later when we get everyone here. Thank you. Director Gephardt.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we'll start off with some project amendments, and then the rest of the e-notebook should look familiar. These are all the projects that came through the omnibus water bills. And what we're asking for today is your review and recommendation to allow us to sign these contracts. I will say that the commission met earlier this month, or last month, I guess now, and have approved all of these that we're bringing for you today. So this is the your recommendation is what we're seeking for on these right now. And on page 2 of the e-notebook, and Mr. Chairman, if you guys have that, great. If not, I can share my screen, whatever you guys prefer.
Director, we do have it, a hard copy.
Great. So we'll just go through that. It's pretty simple, but I'll try to explain particularly this first block on page 2. These are the amendments. These were not necessarily in the omnibus bills, so I'll explain what we're doing with these. These are existing contracts. The first one I'll talk about, the LaPrelle Irrigation District Rehab Level 2 Phase 2. This is the LaPrelle Dam project. And the omnibus construction bill appropriated $4.3 million for this project. But as we were discussing this and leading into the development of the omnibus bill, we presented the idea that we would perform this work through task orders. And one of the main reasons for that is we're trying to leverage this $4.3 million appropriation to get additional funding from federal partners. And we've currently submitted to FEMA for approximately a $3.25 million appropriation or grant. And we're also working with some other federal funding for applications to their programs as well. So the thought is to keep this money unobligated in the event that we can use it for match money as much as possible, but continue with the project and maintain our critical path. So this first appropriation under this 4.3, we're requesting a $194,400 change order to the existing contract. And really what this does is continues with the geotechnical program. It's setting us up to be able to bid and select a consultant to help with the geotech drilling program. Right now, we're thinking that'll be later this fall, but we're kind of taking baby steps so we're not obligating all of this money and allowing us to be nimble with other applications for additional funding. So the first item on this block is that project. The next two projects are.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
so who built the dam initially, and then who is that, the Labrel Reservoir?
Director,
Presently, who owns that?
Director Kemp.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, the dam was built over 100 years ago. I don't know who built it, but if you remember correctly, we did a study and found that the dam has reached its useful life. So we're continuing to look at the best way to remediate that issue. It's under SEO orders for fill restrictions currently. It's in really rough shape, so we're continuing to try to address it as quickly as we can. And also, like I said, we're really trying hard to get some federal funding partners to help us with the ultimate cost of that. Does that answer your question, Representative?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, so this appropriation the commission feels is enough. We've talked a bit about that dam and appropriations and the shape that it's in. So this is going to, I think at least at this point, that's going to keep things in check.
Director Gephardt.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, what we're doing with this appropriation is we're just getting enough money to continue the work until May. You'll likely see another request after our May commission meeting. It'll likely be larger to really continue with some of the design, but we're trying to get enough work done and keep the consultants going on it and then we'll just keep appropriating money. So you guys might get tired of seeing this project, but our opinion is continuing this way allows us the most flexibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Director, can you tell us, this is above Douglas, isn't it? The location?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is on Laprelle Creek, southwest of Douglas. It's right upstream of the Ayers Natural Bridge.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please proceed.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the next two contract amendments are somewhat related. They both involve the Levitt Reservoir project. And really what we're trying to do with these amendments is to obligate money that has already been appropriated for the project. It's remaining unobligated at this time. But what we're doing is it's approximately $275,000 that I think it reverts in 2021 or 2022. But what we're doing is we're obligating it to two existing contracts. The first one is the final design contract, and that's with RJH Consultants. And we're amending their contract to $200,000, increasing $200,000. And really what we're doing with that is replenishing a discretionary task that they've been using. They've been some extra work on some easement acquisitions, but then the remainder within that discretionary task or contingency account under that contract would be to allow them to do design alternatives during construction or prior to construction as cost savings, and really if the contractors come back during bidding or shortly after bidding, if they've got some ideas on cost savings, it's to allow them to vet those options. And then the second part of this amendment is with our current contract with the permitting liaison, which is currently Wank. Wank was purchased by Stantec, another engineering firm. And so what this amendment does is a couple things. It extends the contract date, and it also provides the name change from Wank to Stantec. And then it adds in $75,000 to their contract. That will allow them to continue with some adaptive management planning and compensatory mitigation planning that would be required from the 404 Army Corps 404 permit. So these two amendments, as I said, were just to obligate previously appropriated money.
This, Mr. Director, this dam is actually up above Grable on the Shell Creek, Beaver Creek area. And are the plans to begin construction like next summer? Is that kind of what I remembered?
Mr. Chairman, we're going through the final design now. We expect to have a 90% within the next month or two. And so the original hope was to get it bid this summer and possibly start construction this fall.
Any questions? All right, I think we're ready to continue.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I should have mentioned this before, but if that is for this first portion, if you guys want to make a motion and an approval to recommend these contracts, these amendments, that would be appreciated.
I think I think let's do that.
I would move that, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Eklund moved it.
Second.
Seconded Senator Steinmetz. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right, we'll go on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The remainder of the e-notebook is really a culmination of the process over the last 13 or 14 months. And you guys have seen these projects go through our entire process. These are the projects that were in the omnibus bills this year that were recently approved. We appreciate you guys' work on those. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. These are like I said, the culmination, and this is just the recommendation for contracts. So the first one under level 1 projects for new development of our planning contracts. The first one would be the Hoback River watershed study. The consultant is Rio Verde Engineering. Contract amount is $276,162. Next project is a Lander Water Master Plan to HDR Engineering in the amount of $207,600. The next project is a master plan for Nordic Ranches. The consultant is Forger and Associates in the amount of $62,900. Next project is the Upton Water Master Plan to Bear Lodge Engineering and Surveying, an amount of $152,483. And the final project under this block is the Wheatland Water Master Plan to Civil Engineering Professionals Incorporated in the amount of $124,890.
All right, committee, is there any discussion or questions? Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Director Gebhardt, just real quick on that Lander Water Master Plan, and we had that Lander Ditches project that was pulled out of the water bill. What would be the difference in that? I mean, what was the Lander Master Plan versus the Lander Ditches project? And was there any discussion of incorporating those?
Director Gebhardt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, we did not have any discussion about combining those through this. The city of Lander has agreed to perform the ditches study on their own, and then they may come back to us following that, depending on the results. But the master plan and the ditches are really two different topics. So the recommendation was to continue with the master plan and allow Lander to to do the study for the ditches on their own.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we need to vote on this portion? Okay, is there a motion to accept this?
So moved.
Senator Guru, second. Senator Steinmetz, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, the same. Motion passed. Continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next block of projects, these are planning contracts for level 2 projects under the WDA account 1 for new development. The first project is the Bighorn Regional Transmission to Dow LLC as the consultant in an amount of $145,700. Next project is the Byron Rural Water Supply to Dow LLC in the amount of $126,440. Next contract would be the Gillette Water System Improvements to Morrison Merrily in the amount of $149,048. And the last project is the Little Snake River Valley Water Supply Phase 2 to Stantec, which was formerly Wank Associates, in the amount of $162,300.
Are there any questions or discussion on these items? I don't see any. Is there a motion to accept them?
Chairman,
Oh, Representative Paxton.
I move we accept the level 2 planning contracts as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I saw Representative Simpson had his hand up. No, we're good. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. On to the next page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 5, our sole single planning contract for level 1 out of our account 2 for rehabilitation. It's the Highland Irrigation District Master Plan. AVI would be the consultant for a contract amount of $191,860. And this is, again, a master plan.
Any questions, discussion? Motion?
I would move that, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Eklund moved it. A second.
Second.
Senator Guru for a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item on page 6, this is a memorandum of understanding between the Water Development Commission and the UW Water Research Program. This is to fund 2 projects, partially fund 2 projects. They will have a match, but the first project is the improved forecasting of water content, spatial distribution, and aquifer potential assessment using geostatistical and hydrogeophysical methods. Our portion of the funding is $97,185. The next project under this MOU would be improving hydrologic predictions in Wyoming's headwaters through detailed quantification of snow melt for an amount of $186,269. So the total memorandum of understanding would be for $283,454.
You mentioned that this is a partial funding. Is there other funds going to this? Is it from UW?
Mr. Chairman, that's typically the way it works is Audrey?
You do the end use, yes.
Yeah, so they will participate in funding as well.
Is it in a 50-50 match, or do you know?
I can look it up.
No, 75, 25.
75-25.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering who is doing this work for us. I don't see any names of who the folks actually are that will be doing this work. Do you have that available, Director?
Yeah,
Gephardt.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pull it up, Senator Steinmetz. This is done by UW faculty and UW students typically. And I'm trying to, I've got it right here. So for the improved forecasting, it's Grana and Kersikian, and last names of Nipkin and Page for the improving the hydrologic predictions. But these would be both staff and students at the university.
Follow up?
Could you tell me the first one again, and if you have any other information, if you could email it over, I'd sure appreciate that.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, the first one is Grana and Parsekian, Parsekin.
Okay,
And we can send over the recommendation and that was in our August meeting, I believe, or subsequent meetings. But we can certainly get you that information.
thank you.
Any other questions? Motion to accept? Representative Paxton, is there a section? Second? Representative Eklund? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. We'll go to the next page, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 7 of the e-notebook. These are the construction project agreements. The first block is for account 1 under new development. And the projects are the Lander Well and Transmission Pipeline 2021 for the city of Lander. The appropriation is for $884,400, and that is a 67% grant. The next project is the Northwest Rural Water System Improvements 2021 for the Northwest Rural Water District. The appropriation amount of $1,413,700, and that's a 67% grant. Next project is the Torrington Well Connection 2021 for the city of Torrington. Appropriation amount of $389,270, and that is also a 67% grant. And the last one, Mr. Chairman, is for those of you on Select Water previously, this was just a name change, but it resulted in a new contract. It changed the sponsor from the Sheridan Area Water Supply to the city of Sheridan. So there was no appropriation. It's previously appropriated money, but it's just a name change for the Sheridan Area Water Supply Transmission 2021 project.
Senator Grew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, new guy question on the 67% grant. Is this typical for, or this is standard, I guess would be the name for this type of project at this phase?
Director Gebhardt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Grew, that is correct. For the municipalities that are able to go to other funding sources for their loan portion or their own money, we try to push them to that and only do the 67% grant. Irrigation districts sometimes will use a loan portion. Their 33% they will borrow from the Water Development Commission. But for municipalities, it's typically the 67% grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. Chairman, I think that brings up a good point. When I just look around the committee, I see 5 new faces on here, about half of it. So I'm just wondering at some point in time, whether, and this is a question for the new members, whether you'd like to go through an orientation with the director to kind of walk through all the program criteria. I think it'd be helpful.
I know it would be.
Especially when we start getting into all the contracts and the programs next year, just to know. So is that something we'd like to do? So what I would suggest, Brandon, maybe if we get a schedule and maybe get something set up, and probably the best time to do it would be at the next workshop that we have or prior to the next workshop that we have. If we do it in the next week or two, it'll all be lost.
Yeah.
So I think before the next meeting, what we'd like to do is set up an orientation with your office and then any of the members that wanted to participate, and then maybe just a couple hour walkthrough to get familiar with the programs and the criteria. Is that something that you could work with us on, Director?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, absolutely. I think it's a great idea. And then I would also offer, we could do one specifically for select water that would probably be a little more in depth. But prior to the next legislative session, if we can work it out, I wouldn't mind the opportunity to present to the entire legislature, those who want to attend, what our program is and how we function. So absolutely, I think that's a great idea.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman and Director Gephardt, be careful what you ask. But I'm looking, when do you have your next, if we flip to the schedule, our next meeting is in May, and you've got the new commissioner orientation, and I think that may be a good time to tag team with the Select Water Committee for those members who wanted to participate in that. And what we may do is just hijack a little bit of that time, because I think it would be beneficial for your members to also understand the makeup and the charter and the role of the Select Water Committee. So we could get with our LSO staff and put together a little primer on for both your new members on the commission and then the new members on Select Water too. So we'll look at sometime around that May 12th, but we'll work with you in the interim between now and then, Director Gephardt and our staff, and try to get together just a framework for a program to do that. Would that work for you?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And I was thinking that May 12th would be the ideal time as well. So we can figure out how much time we would want to dedicate to it and work with you guys to figure out.
All right.
Yeah. Great idea.
Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So how many new commissioners do we have? You know that offhand?
Mr. Chairman, currently we have 3 new commissioners and 1 vacant seat right now that we'll likely fill at some point.
Any other questions on this page? A motion to accept? Senator Grew, second.
Second.
Senator Hicks, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passed. We'll go on to the next page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 8. These are construction project agreements under Water Development Account 2, the rehab account. The first project is the Interstate Irrigation and Reservoir Irrigation District improvements for the Interstate Irrigation and Reservoir Irrigation District, in the appropriation amount of $2,827,400. And this is a 67% grant. They're coming up with the remaining 33% on their own. Next project is the Salt Creek Transmission Pipeline 2021. This is the Salt Creek Joint Powers Board. Appropriation of $3,604,600, and that's a 67% grant. And then the next project is the Shoshone Irrigation District Improvements 2021 project for the Shoshone Irrigation District. Appropriation amount of $240,000. This is a materials only grant, and then I'll do the next one, then I'll explain what the materials only grant is. The next project is the Sidon Irrigation District Rehab. Appropriation amount $576,000. So, Mr. Chairman, what these material only grants are is the water development will pay 100% of the cost of materials that go into the project. And then the sponsors portion of the match is really the engineering, the construction oversight, the design, and the actual installation of the materials. So these typically work out to be much less than the 67-33 split, usually probably closer to 50-50 or even tilted a little more towards them contributing more. So that's the materials only grant portion.
I need to advise the committee, I do live on the Shoshone Irrigation District. But I think I can still vote, and I'm planning on it. There's 35,000 acres in that district, and I own, I don't know, 350. So, but hopefully that's okay. But are there any questions? Is there a motion?
Move to adopt.
Senator Hicks and Representative Eklund with a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. We'll go to the next page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next 3 pages in the e-notebook deal with our small water program. Just a little background on the small water program. These are projects that come to us through our small water program, which we can match or we can provide $35,000 to a project, and that would be at a minimum of 50-50 participation from the sponsor as well. And so what we do is we get these applications in. The omnibus bills appropriated money without knowing what the projects were. We get these projects in, we vet them, make sure they're eligible, and then they end up on this list that's being presented to you today. So we have 2 accounts for the small water program. One is an account 1, which is new development, the development of new water. And then the second one is account 2, the rehabilitation of existing facilities typically. But the omnibus water bill appropriated $1 million for account 1 small water program and $500,000 for account 2. So we received and have identified for water development account 1, 55 projects that met our eligibility and that we're recommending for funding. As I mentioned, we appropriated $1 million. So the total amount of these requests is $1,546,675. The reason we're able to fund this is we're using carryover money from the previous program. And that amount that we had, this will be on the second page of the page 9, I believe, page 10 of the e-notebook. The very bottom is the summary. But we've carried over $598,293.72. So with the new requests that are eligible, we're going to end up in that account with $51,618.72 that would be carried over to the next year. So we were able to fund all eligible applications this year under Water Development Account 1 for small water. And I can go into more depth if you like. I've also got our small water program administrator here, Jody Pavlik, if there are any detailed questions, but I'll stand for any questions on Water Development Account 1.
Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, on page 1, about halfway down, I see the High Savory Dam tailwater restoration. Quite a large improvement there. Would you mind describing to us what that project is all about?
Director Gephardt.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will try, but I'll probably bring Jody into that. But I believe it is a portion of a larger project, stream restoration, among other things, wetland enhancements, down below the High Savory Dam on High Savory Creek. It's a large stream restoration project. I believe it's been in the works for multiple years, but this we're just funding $35,000 of that larger project.
I was just concerned about the title there. It looked like it was a challenge with the tailwater, but it's actually a stream restoration downstream. Thank you.
Any other questions? Motion to accept or discussion? Senator Grew, Senator Steinmetz. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 11 is the account 2 small water program. We received 9 eligible applicants this year. The total amount requested was $268,050. As I mentioned, we appropriated $500,000 in the omnibus bill. We also carried over from previous funding $329,000, roughly $600. So if we appropriate all the requests this year, we'll end up with an account balance of $561,500 and roughly $30 in that account.
Questions, committee? All righty, Representative Eklund moved that and Representative Paxton seconded it. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion carries. All right, go to the next page.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before we get to the schedule, I just wanted to update the committee on some changes that were approved by the commission to the small water program operating criteria. And really all we did, we're not going to go to public comment on this because we made a change to the operating criteria to comport to some changes in the omnibus bill that changed the language dealing with the advertisement for final completion of a project. So previously we required a notice to be published in papers to advertise the completion of a project and start a 41-day advertising period. But previous legislation changed the definition or added the definition of what a public work is, and then subsequently changed the requirement that if these small water program projects are not a public work, then they don't need to do this 41-day advertising period and advertise it in the paper. So really all we did is change the criteria to comport with that language. And then I could stand for any questions that you may have on that.
Any questions? Doesn't look like it.
All right. And then, Mr. Chairman, also associated with this, the commission approved the director because of this change. That changes all of our prior contracts as well. So it'll bring those all current. And so what will happen then is we will have to have a contract amendment if these sponsors choose to determine that their work is not a public work and absolve them of having to do the 41-day advertising. So what we'll have to do is amend each contract. The Attorney General's office recommended that we do it this way. So the commission approved me to administer these contract amendments, my signature, so we don't have to go to the commission for each one of these. And so what we'll likely do is we'll reach out to all of the sponsors currently under contract, ask them which ones would like to have a contract amendment and proceed that way rather than just automatically amending every contract. So we'll let the sponsors decide if they want to amend it, and then we'll work with them to get that amendment done to their contracts.
Any questions, committee? Don't see any, so I proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last thing that I have, I believe, is just the upcoming meeting schedule. So the next joint meeting with Select Water and the Commission is May 12th, 13th, and 14th. That's the one where we will try to have an orientation for new members. Then in August, we have our summer tour meeting, and that's a joint commission Select Water Committee. Right now, we're planning on having that in Wheatland, and then we would probably tour LaPrelle, the Wheatland Irrigation District, and we're tossing around the idea of possibly going to the Goshen Irrigation District tunnels, if we can work that out as well.
I think that we have approval from this committee. That sounds good.
And Mr. Chairman, the rest of the schedule is there for your members.
Yeah, it looks like on October 5 through 8, we'll plan on that, and November 8th through the 10th. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Hicks.
Director, we don't have the December, and then we typically, I'm trying to think, next year is a budget year, so We would be looking at are we looking at January then to do the final on the omnibus water bill?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, that's
Just want
correct.
to let the committee know, we don't have all the meetings listed here that are going to occur when we get to the development of the omnibus water bill. I'm anticipating we'd still do the December, the initial review, and because of the budget year next year, January, or are we going to go from November to January?
We'll go from November to January on a budget year. We won't have the December meeting. And we'll send out the complete schedule following this meeting to the members.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered, we're contemplating all this ARP money we're getting. Is there, would there be any coming in for infrastructure that we could utilize in some of the water development projects that are slated to be developed over the years, or have you researched that at all?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, we're watching that, and what I have seen so far is, and I could be completely wrong, but what I've seen so far is a lot of that with that particular package would be more for what I've seen is replacing lead pipes and that sort of thing. There's also some discussions of other congressional legislation that may play more into our program, and we continue to monitor those. I don't know that there's a bill draft on that, but there's some discussion. We've had some conversations with Senator Barrasso's office, and we're making it known that we would sure like to be included in those funding packages if we can.
Any other questions? I think we're through, maybe through with our director. And we'll continue on to, I think we'll go to proposed interim topics, if that's okay with the committee. And our first one is proposed by Senator Hicks, and I'll let him go through that.
Yeah, members of the committee, this would just, on the Water Development Commission, currently it requires a party split based on water districts. What we have every 2 years, it seems like we have issues trying to find people to serve because of the party affiliation. It's always been my belief that water is really not a partisan issue, and all it would do is get rid of the requirement to have a party split on the commission itself. That's all it does. Be looking at changing that.
Senator Hicks, is it a 50-50 right now, or 2/3, 1/3?
Mr. Chairman or Vice Chairman, my recollection is it rotates. Maybe the director knows that. It does require a party split. The commissioners are selected by water districts. There's 4 water districts within the state, and then an at-large member. This just gives the governor more flexibility to go out and find people to serve without the constraint of having a party affiliation. So I don't know what the requirement is, whether it's 50-50 or what it is.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's 75-25.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? I think it's a good topic.
Yeah, we can look at the statutes and see what the committee wants to do. So do we want to take a look at that? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those not. All right, it's on the interim.
Thank you. I brought in this last year, the next topic concerning orphan water rights. And I'm not sure if that's the correct title. We do have our state engineer here, Greg Lanning, and I think I probably would be best if I let him come up and explain what we're thinking about. Please introduce yourself and tell us who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Greg Lanning. I'm your state engineer. Been here over a year now, a year and a couple months, and oh, what a year. Doing our best to stay afloat, with budget reductions, et cetera, and dealing with the COVID requirements and just our organization in general. But I'm happy to be here today to talk about orphan water rights. That was a phrase that was coined. After I explain it, it makes sense to you. One example of what might orphan a water right is a development or change in land use, generally around the urbanized areas that are growing out into areas that have been historically irrigated. And at times, or for the most part, these are very senior water rights that had irrigated before. And development comes over the top of that, and hence leaves those water rights in some cases, or in some cases orphaned, or with no place to go. And so last year, thank you committee, you took this up. We got quite a ways into it. We got a portion of it taken care of related to making it easier for water users to petition to and then move orphaned water rights. It was a small move, if you will. We had a more comprehensive thought in the beginning, which included some changes to both Titles 18 and Title 15, cities and counties, in terms of how developments are received into a county or into a city. And if we could describe better, for instance, what to do with water rights in the beginning, then they stand a better chance of getting to a place where we can use them. The whole idea and the concept is, of course, if we orphan these water rights for too long a period, they may be subject to abandonment. And we don't want to do that in Wyoming, especially because they've become vulnerable or less water to be available to us, and especially less senior water that's mostly senior to a lot of our downstream users and compacts related to that. So it's in our best interest, I think, to take care of these water rights. So the remaining work was to these two titles, cities and counties. And the comment was made at the last committee meeting that number one, does this delay the review process related to subdivision approvals, et cetera? And then it led to a more broad discussion related to, who are all the stakeholders and have they been asked and what are their thoughts? And so we were tasked with going out and getting a public testimony related to that. I have to admit, we haven't proceeded very far on that, Mr. Chairman. We've been struggling with other issues recently. And then also, by the way, I'm concerned that I don't quite have the staff we used to have related to being able to get out and conduct these meetings. We no longer have the position of assistant state engineer, for instance. And then I no longer have an executive assistant either, formerly known as a secretary. So we're a little limited in our, but notwithstanding, we'll still find the resources. So having said that, I don't know that it rises necessarily to an interim topic because I don't want to disappoint you in the lack of progress. It may be a topic on a future agenda related to updates on orphan water rights. And I certainly plan on joining you and the director, Gebhardt, in all of these meetings and being available to respond and have the discussion on any and all topics. So that's the status of orphan water rights.
All righty. Are there questions? Yes. Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one curiosity question as I deal with some of these issues up at home. What constitutes an orphan water right? I mean, I understand the fact that you'd built subdivision out on a former alfalfa or hayfield or something like that, but how long and what is the position as far as when somebody has not been using water rights and not put them into beneficial use for what amount of time before they would be subject to possibly, taking or whatever? I've seen some situations come up and it gets pretty wild. And I'm just curious as to what is the way that works and how long do you not use your water right before it's subject to reassignment?
Mr. Lanning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nyman. The statute states that a water right, if not used within 5 years, is subject to abandonment. The state of Wyoming historically doesn't take a very aggressive posture on that, and generally abandonment comes as a result of some other water user being interested in that water. And so a third party, if you will, or another affected party may initiate abandonment proceedings on certain water rights.
Follow up? Nope. Mr. Lanning, I'd like to continue this as an interim topic and proceed like we might have some legislation. And we can always say that we're not quite ready, but I think we're needing to reach out to cities, is that correct? And counties, and then we're thinking about trying to reach out to the agriculture associations.
Mr. Chairman, if I may briefly just say who some of the potential affected stakeholders are. At the last meeting, for instance, the Realtors Association was interested. Title 18, the counties, is pretty robust. Doesn't require much changes. Or too many changes. That statute is in pretty good shape. The idea then is to take those changes and then mirror Title 15 into Title 18 cities, municipals. And that does take more work. And so WAM, the Association of Municipalities, you bet, county commissioners, and those are obvious stakeholders. And then it's not all about necessarily those two titles. You know, the idea of abandoned water rights could exceed out into other stakeholder groups as well. And we'll try and we'll certainly do our best to identify them and get them at the table.
I see we have some ag associations in here. I don't know if they'd like to comment at some point, but we'll bring them up at that time. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we let Mr. Lanning go, the four of us that are on the appropriations this last fall interviewed the department heads in regards to their budget cuts. And I'd like to acknowledge our state engineer. He did a really nice job, very conscientious and very thoughtful in his approach to, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. I thought you did a very nice job. So I'd like to acknowledge him publicly for that.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Any other comments? Thank you. Would the ag associations want to comment on this topic? Nope, doesn't look like it. Are there any other interim topics?
Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking that there is a tremendous level of, and if Greg, if you could come on back up, I'm going to ask you for just an update. So within the Colorado River Compact, there's a lot of activity going on with the declining hydrology and increasing demand within the Colorado River Basin. And Greg, and I don't know that it's an interim topic, but it's certainly something with all of the activity. I think it's important that the Select Water Committee knows what's going on in the water world of Wyoming. So what I would ask, Greg, if you could just go real quick, you know, some of the highlight things that are activities are going on as far as demand management or compact call. And then what I would suggest is that at one of our meetings that we have a kind of a formal presentation to get the committee up to speed, but because it's going to affect about a third of the state of Wyoming. So Greg, if you can just real briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hicks, I really appreciate the question and the opportunity to speak to it. As I look out over the summer and what the state engineer's office in particular is going to be working on, top of my list is the Colorado River and the Green River here. We call it the Upper Colorado River. We have a Upper Colorado River Commission of the 4 Upper Basin states in the Colorado River Basin. And then there's 3 lower basin states, including, California, Nevada, and Arizona. And you can watch these maps daily as to where the drought is being persistent over the years. We have a pretty persistent drought here in Wyoming over the last summer especially. And these are all issues related obviously to water availability and demand. And the Colorado River is kind of the apex of that for us and for the West. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion related and movement related to what do we do for drought contingency planning on the Colorado River. The lower basin states have an obligation to come up with some water that they've enjoyed for a long time and try to wean themselves off of that water. Also in that is the operation of the 2 major reservoirs, Lake Powell and Mead. And how do we operate those in relation to the amount of water necessary for demand as well as available? And then finally, not necessarily finally, by 2026, we're renegotiating what we call the interim guidelines on the Colorado River. And so it's a relatively short window in the way things go to discuss all these issues related to operating, especially the 2 reservoirs. It's really a discussion about the plumbing and how the plumbing works. It's not necessarily any change necessarily to the laws of the Colorado River in general. But if those don't go correctly, it could go deeper into those laws and exactly what our relationship is on the Colorado River. So drought contingency planning, that's a big issue for the lower basin states. They have an obligation to come up with water, what we call the structural deficit, the water that they've enjoyed over the years, to try and wean themselves out. The upper basin states get involved in relatively two options. One's demand management. That is there a way that we can use our water different and put it aside and make it available for our obligations on the Colorado River, demand management. The other one is curtailment. If you're not delivering the amount of water that you're supposed to from the upper basin states, then one option is to curtail the water use in the upper basin states. The date on that is 1922. And so we find that bifurcates pretty quickly. Ag uses are generally senior to that and therefore in general not subject to those calls. The later water uses generally go with municipalities and industries. And so you'll see kind of 2 different opinions and 2 different approaches as to what their opinion is on demand management or curtailment. And once we look into those more junior rights, then what other water options are available, for instance, in terms of moving water around it, looking at a different way, or storage water, for instance, in Wyoming, and how can that be used differently? These are all very big issues, and I agree, and that's what I will be doing this summer in particular. But we have a good staff. We're partnering with the University of Wyoming that's helping us on the demand management. We've been into it now for a couple of years. You may very well have been on one of the committees, as a matter of fact, in demand management. That'll continue as well.
Thank you, Greg. And so what I would request that at one of our upcoming meetings, and I don't know at this point in time, that you give the Select Water Committee, formal presentation, because there's so much nuanced stuff with, how, what Wyoming's going to do with Fontenelle Reservoir, which is an asset we have. How is that deployed? When it really comes down to when we talk about demand management, that's somebody turning off their irrigation water and then somebody in the state of Wyoming doing a temporary buy in that. So it has big implications. I know there's an economic study that I've reviewed a couple of times that the university's looked at. It has pretty significant consequences, particularly to the agricultural economy in the Green River Basin of Wyoming. That I think it's important that the committee just stays abreast of all those issues. I know the governor's looking at putting together a small working group on this issue to start down this road. So you're going to hear more and more and more as we get closer to the hydrological cliff or the empty bucket, however you want to phrase that. So,
Senator Boner.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a slightly different suggestion, talking about water development. I think it maybe prudent to have as a formal subject, the developments with federal funding, as well as looking at other funding sources. I think that's pertinent, something we looked at briefly on the Ag Committee, didn't really get anywhere. Just looking for other areas of funding as we face, that is kind of a correlation to the aging infrastructure area that we looked at. I think that's something that would be appropriate for this committee. Obviously, there's probably some opportunities at the federal level, but don't want to just limit it to that. It's clear to me that the way that we have, the funding we have right now is not adequate. We're probably not likely to gain more state funding into our water development accounts. And it just might be good to look at other ways, switching back to water development quickly, to take that up as a topic, recognizing the potential for some one-time funding coming from the feds that my daughter is going to pay for, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, on that point, and I think Director Gephardt talked about that. I mean, this committee had looked at some of the legislation that had been sponsored last year, particularly federal legislation and Senator Brasso at that time was chair of the EPW committee that had significant federal money in that program. And I think the director talked about being in close conversation with our delegation as we start to see an infrastructure bill develop, that it's certainly something that we've conveyed to our congressional delegation, that water is a big issue in Wyoming and that we'd like to see a significant component in any infrastructure bill. Take that under consideration. So I think that the chairman of Ag makes a good point, Director, that we, and for our staff, Abby, that we want to stay in close communication with our congressional delegation on any movement on any infrastructure bill. We may ask Abby if you could contact their office and work with Director Gephardt to get any updates on any of the existing legislation and where that fits and how that might fit into any infrastructure bill. And then ask our delegation if there's any updates, whether they would like to provide those at our May or any of our other meetings as this thing starts to develop.
It's a great.
Because I do agree with the chairman that if there's an opportunity out there with our aging infrastructure and even just our water development programs, we need to be able to take advantage of that.
Great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Eklund.
I'll back up just a little bit, back to the drought contingency in the Green River, Upper Green River Basin. And right now we presently with our cloud seeding, all of these seeders are stationary, correct? Do we use airplanes at all, seeding clouds?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, it's a combination. We have a lot of several ground-based, and quite frankly, the majority in the Upper Green River Basin are ground-based, but then we have aerial seeding, closer to in this here in Nevada, or Madres and Snowies. So it's a combination for the total Wyoming program.
Okay, I wasn't real sure of that. I do know that in the Snowies and the Sierra Madres and Laramie range, you're able to target the storm easier than you could with stationaries. And I wondered if that isn't something we need to look at expanding to try to mitigate the drought.
Mr. Chairman, real quickly on a follow-up, Representative Eklund, also we partner with other states in the basin all the way down. So, Colorado, et cetera, have ground-based stations as well that seed clouds that add ultimately to the Colorado River Basin as well. It's a pretty comprehensive program.
I missed quite a bit of that discussion, but we are getting quite a bit of funds from the lower states. Is that not correct? I'm sure it is.
That is, Mr. Chairman, for our program in particular.
Yes. Any other questions? Okay, we good on that? I think that's a great topic too. So we got 2 or 3 of them that we need to bring up in May and go over. I kind of jumped over the orphan. Oh, darn it. On mute. Boy. Working.
Would you turn your phone off?
Twice.
Everybody grabs their phone.
Yeah, sorry about that. We did not vote on the orphan water rights. I hope that the committee as a whole will say that that's a good topic. So I don't know if we,
Let's vote.
all those in favor of having that as our topic, raise your hand. And all those opposed, the same. All right, so we'll plan on that. Thank you. Are there any other topics that Representative Simpson?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I thought you were moving on to the next agenda. I'd like to acknowledge our good senators in this committee. It was an effort by those people that do not value water as much as we do around this circle, and our good senators stepped up to the plate and saved our water account number one from being taken, removed. Over 600,000 would have been perpetual. And so thanks, senators, you did a great job.
Yes, thank you guys for taking care of that.
Mr. Chairman, we appreciate the good fight that our House colleagues come over. It's a team effort. You know, that was a 29-31 vote in the House, so on that issue to rate water one. And I would hope that we continue to see the battle on the House side and someday prevail on that. But until that time, it's a team effort. Thank you, gentlemen.
Representative Eklund,
So
your mic.
just to kind of add to that for the new members, that's a second raid on it. We were fairly unsuccessful in the first raid, but we'll try to get that money back at some point in time, I hope.
I agree with you that at some point, hopefully we can refund our account one.
So members and Mr. Chairman, that brings up a good point. A couple of years ago, Director Gephardt, we're dealing with this issue when the initial raid came on a water one to put the Board of Control on there. It's now up to 15 million per biennium to afford to fund the Board of Control out of water one. One of the discussions we'd had at that time, it's been my continued frustration to see members of the legislature vote to continue to raid that. At the same time, I went through that and I was very disappointed in several representatives that currently have projects in their district to the tune of over $50 million coming out of water one. And I continue to think that's very alarming when some of the biggest projects we have, and then we have no legislative support from those. I've always thought it should be part of the program, and we discussed this a couple of years ago with your predecessor, that I would like to see in the applications for water development funding, letters of support. You could simply do that through criteria from, at the very minimum, one representative and one senator from those districts. Until we do something of that nature, I do not think that the majority of the legislature understands the importance of the program. At the same time, that would be one mechanism to bring it to their attention that when you're building a $50 or $60 million dam in their district, that maybe they ought to support the program. And yet they vote against to raid the program. And whether it's a municipal water project or an agricultural reclamation or a storage project, I'd like to see the commission put in criteria and require letters of support. This is nothing different than what SLIB does when you come in for an MRG program. We strongly suggest that those municipalities go out and get those letters of support from their legislators. I would certainly think that would have helped stop some of the raids on water development had we had that requirement in place. So just a suggestion, but it's something that I think we need to continue because I don't think the raids have gone away. So any thoughts, Director Gephardt?
If I could jump on that, I'd like to.
Go ahead,
I,
jump on there.
I agree. We've gone through this and gone through it. We have, even in this capital city here, I think we had some records where over the past 50 years, this city's gotten like, I don't know, I want to say 15 to 18 million every 10 years over the past 50 years. So it's a lot of money coming here. And then yet we have some of the staunchest legislators trying to raid that account. Hopefully we need to go to WHAM, and maybe the director could go to one of their meetings, their annual meeting, and give a presentation. I think that'd be a really good idea to get the cities on board and see if they can't actually push a little too.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for your support, but also thanks for all your efforts in protecting our accounts. We have heard the message. We'll look at what SLIB does for their requirement, and then we'll be ready to present something at these upcoming meetings. Typically, our August meeting is where we look at changes to the operating criteria. So we'll start having those discussions prior to that and see what we can do.
Any other discussion?
Yeah,
Representative Eklund.
To add to what the chairman said, we listened to some comments on the floor concerning the other projects in municipalities. And it's really frustrating that after the account's been rated to the tune of $15 million, they don't understand why their own cities' programs have been curtailed. And I think that education would be really good if maybe even especially at appropriations or something like that, because some of this comes from their need to balance budget. But what we need to do is make sure that people have a understanding of what is fair as we distribute the money and serve the people of Wyoming with what we have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Director.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think this kind of plays into my desire to have a presentation to anybody willing in the legislature to listen to an explanation of our program and what we do. So I know that it had been done in the past. We didn't get it done prior to this session. But like I said, I would like to prepare a presentation to give to anybody willing to listen and maybe enlighten some people in the legislature as well.
Any other discussion on this? All right. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Director Gephardt, I do think that's a good idea. So we would have to work, with typically what happens, the best time to do that's is the first day or two of the session, is to make that available. Abby, if we can just capture that, something that we want to facilitate with the director and the Water Development Office as we get close to that January meeting. Let's try to work with LSO and get a time and a place. I just don't want to lose that. So let's make a note of that, and then we'll facilitate that to happen. Director Gephardt will work with staff and get a meeting place here in the Capitol set up at a time and get that well announced before the session, that's available to those who want to come. I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll also mention that looking back at some of the previous presentations, it looked like the state engineer's office was involved in those presentations too. So if Mr. Lanning thinks it would be fruitful, maybe we can include a joint presentation.
Sounds great. We'll get it on the calendar.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there any public comments? And then I need to ask Abigail if there's any virtual. I don't see any.
Mr. Chairman, we do have one person with their hand raised.
Oh, okay. Will you bring them in? Looks like maybe Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize, I'm running a little behind here, so.
Can you state your name and who you're with, please?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Ken Hamilton with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. You mentioned, and I was a little behind on the video about looking into the orphan water rights issue. Um, I know for our members, it certainly is an issue, and I think it's something that we are interested in continuing, and that's really all I wanted to comment on.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Thank you. We appreciate you talking to us about it, and we want to make sure you're included.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else, Abigail?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I think there's just one more topic for the committee, the election of chairman and vice chairman. And I don't know how we want to go about that. Senator Hicks?
Abby, could you just go through, my understanding is there's not a statutory provision that, the committee chairman swap, but it's been the tradition, as long as I can remember, that it would, every 2 years, it moves from the House to the Senate, the House to the Senate, and back and forth. But Abby, could you just review that for us real quick? I don't believe there's any statutory provision that requires that, is there?
Correct, Senator Hicks. The statute simply requires that the committee elect a chairman and vice chairman, but historically it's switched between the chambers.
All right, thank you, Abby. So that's just the tradition. I think we ought to honor that tradition. I think it served the committee well. So the Senate's has had that for the last 2 years. So I would recommend that the chairmanship go to the House for the next 2 years, and then the Senate would serve as vice chairman. So I don't know how you want to proceed with the elections at this time, but it would be elections. I will open elections, nominations for chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Representative Simpson.
Is there a second? Second, any other nominations?
Can I nominate myself?
You
Because I
can
would like to
nominate
do
yourself.
that. Yes, I would like to do that.
Is there a second for Representative Larson? Second. All right. What I think we'll do is, I think it's always good to have a secret ballot. So if we would, we don't have any staff here. So what we may do, I'm just trying to think of the best way to proceed without.
Senator Hicks, we could do an email ballot as well.
That's what I'm thinking, Abby. So let's have, how quick do you need those, Abby? Can we get those in and get this election over?
I would need those. I need to have a chairman to get a letter to Management Council. If you could also do your nominations for vice chair, and I can send them all out in an email.
Okay. Let's do that. Any nominations for vice chair?
I would nominate Senator Hicks.
Got a motion and a second. Any other nominations for vice chairman? All right, nominations for vice chair close. Abby, if you'll get those ballots out to us, I'd appreciate it, and then we'll get those back. All right, Mr. Vice Chair, is there any other business?
Not that I know of. Anyone else?
Can I go ahead and recap what I do have for the letter, and I'll confirm this with whoever's selected chairman, but for your interim topics, we have the WWDC commissioner party splits, and then we have orphan water rights. And then it looks like we have updates on the demand management plan, updates on other funding sources that potentially coming out of the federal government for water development funding, and cloud seeding. Did you want any of those to be specific topics?
Yeah, so on Abby, on the Colorado River, it's broader than just demand management. So let's just call that Colorado River issues. Because it's broader than just demand management. I think we'll look at potential curtailment, look at the other assets that Wyoming has and how they would play in any program. So just a little broader there. And those, when we add those to the topics, you know, I don't anticipate any of those are going to require legislation. I'm not sure they even need to go to management council as a result. I think
That
we
was my
just-
question. If it's an update, I won't put it in the letter.
Yeah,
But if you want it as a formal study topic, I would.
You know, I'm looking at the committee, but I think it's more the committee is going to want those items on there. I don't know that they need to go to management council. That will just be our request for agency updates. And so the only two topics that I have would be the party split and then the orphan water rights for. Does everybody else concur with that? All right, yeah, so let's just do that, Abigail, those would be the only two that we would go to management council with. Everybody good with that? All right.
All right. Meeting adjourned then.